The next sutta is 22.95. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Ayodhya on the bank of the river Ganges. There, the Blessed One addressed the monks thus: Monks, suppose that this river Ganges were carrying along a great lump of foam. A man with good sight would inspect it, ponder it, and carefully investigate it, and it would appear to him to be void, hollow, insubstantial. For what substance could there be in a lump of foam? So too monks, whatever kind of body there is, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, a monk inspects it, ponders it, and carefully investigates it, and it would appear to him to be void, hollow, insubstantial. For what substance could there be in body? Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is giving a simile for our body. You must remember the Buddha spoke this sutta about 2,500 years ago when science was not advanced. Yet the Buddha, because of his psychic power, he could see that our body is made up of what? Cells, sipao cells. And these cells are born and die. Very quickly they pass away. So they're very similar to this lump of foam. When you put fat into water, you stir it, you get a lot of foam. But when you look carefully, these bubbles in the foam, they burst and new ones are formed and old ones will burst. They keep bursting and new ones will form. So in the same way, our body, the cells, there are trillions of cells in our body and they are dying and being born, dying and being born. As we eat food, as we take nutriment, then it makes new cells and the old cells will die. And then we keep eating and we sustain our body. That's why the Buddha says that the body is sustained by food. Without food, the body will die. The old cells will die and no new cells are created. So we have to keep on taking food. And the interesting thing is the Buddha says all beings subsist on food. Not only human beings. Devas also have to eat. Ghosts also have to eat. Animals have to eat. Hell beings also have to eat. All beings have to eat to sustain the body. And all beings have a body. It's just that there are certain, like spirits, we cannot see. But the fact that we cannot see doesn't mean that they don't have a body. They have a body. It's only that their body is fine, so we cannot see with the human eyes. So this simile is a very good simile for the body. The body is just like a foam. If you look into the body, you cannot find anything solid inside the body, just like in the foam. Can you find anything that is permanent, that's unchanging? You cannot find. So our body also is made up of all these cells, sipao. There's always dying and new ones arise, and there's nothing inside there that is permanent or unchanging. Suppose monks that in the autumn, when it is raining and big raindrops are falling, a water bubble arises and bursts on the surface of the water. A man with good sight would inspect it, ponder it, and carefully investigate it, and it would appear to him to be void, hollow, insubstantial. For what substance could there be in a water bubble? So too monks, whatever kind of feeling there is, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, a monk inspects it, ponders it, and carefully investigates it, and it would appear to him to be void, hollow, insubstantial. For what substance could there be in feeling? I'll stop here for a moment. This is another classic example. The Buddha says feeling is just like the water bubble that arises on the surface of a pond or a lake and the raindrops fall on it. Why this example is so good is because when the raindrops fall on the water and the bubble forms, it is very similar to what happens at our six senses. The six senses, we are impinged by contact from the six external sense objects. For example, sights will impinge on our eye, and when the form impinges on our eye, there's contact, and then feeling arises. Similarly, a sound comes to our ear when somebody says something to us, and then we hear that sound contacts our ear, then a feeling arises. Similarly, with smell, taste, touch, and thoughts. So whenever there is contact, a feeling arises. So that's why this simile is so good. When the water contacts, when the raindrop contacts the water surface, immediately a bubble forms, just like the feeling. And the Buddha wants us to understand that this feeling only lasts for a short while, and then it will burst. So similarly, our feelings actually last for a short while. But sometimes it appears long to us. Why? Because we think about it. For example, somebody says something nasty to us, immediately the unpleasant feeling arises. If we don't think about it, it will just subside. But the problem with many of us is that we start thinking about it, and then we get annoyed. Why should he say such a thing to me? I have been so good to him. I did him so many favors and all that. And you keep thinking, and it multiplies. These thoughts multiply. So the feeling persists. And if you continue thinking about it, at night, it will still persist until you cannot sleep. You have a sleepless night because you are angry. So actually feeling, if you don't think about it, it just arises and passes away. Suppose monks, that in the last month of the hot season, at high noon, a shimmering mirage appears. A man with good sight would inspect it, ponder it, and carefully investigate it. And it would appear to him to be void, hollow, insubstantial. For what substance could there be in a mirage? So too monks, whatever kind of perception there is, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, a monk inspects it, ponders it, and carefully investigates it, and it would appear to him to be void, hollow, insubstantial. For what substance could there be in perception? And stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha gives a simile of the hot season. During the hot season, during noon time, it's very hot, and somehow the conditions make a mirage appear. And then when you look at the mirage, this mirage is like example I can think of is like a person is in the desert, he's lost in the desert, and he's walking for many days without water, without food. So his mind becomes overheated. So he's looking for a place where there is water, where there's an oasis with trees and all that. So he starts imagining. He sees an oasis with a lake and trees and all that. And then he rushes towards it. When he reaches it, he finds it disappeared. It's only created by the mind. So in this way, this mirage is mind created. So in the same way, when there is contact at our six sense doors, feeling arises, followed by perception, and this perception is created by habit. For example, if a person sees somebody of the opposite sex is attractive, then firstly, when you see, nice feeling arises, followed by the perception that this person is very attractive. But this perception of somebody being attractive is not necessarily true to somebody else who sees that person may not look attractive. Or you perceive a certain color, but it's not necessary that somebody else will see the same color as you, especially if one of you is color blind. So it is somehow it is insubstantial. It is not absolute. Suppose monks, that a man needing hardwood, seeking hardwood, wandering in search of hardwood, would take a sharp axe and enter a forest. There he would see the trunk of a large plantain tree, straight, fresh, without a fruit bud core. He would cut it down at the root, cut off the crown, and unroll the coil. As he unrolls the coil, he would not find even softwood, let alone hardwood. A man with good sight would inspect it, ponder it, and carefully investigate it. and it would appear to him to be void, hollow, insubstantial. For what substance could there be in the trunk of a plantain tree? So too monks, whatever kind of volition there are, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, a monk inspects it, ponders it and carefully investigates it. As he investigates it or them, it appears to him to be void, hollow, insubstantial. For what substance could there be in volition? Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is giving the simile of a banana tree. Plantain plant here is a banana tree with volition. When we exercise volition, we make a decision to do this or not to do that. And you have the feeling, I want this. I don't want this. You think there is an I inside that makes the decision, but actually there is no I. It's just like a robot. If you make a robot, you have a good computer inside so that it automatically responds to certain situations. And if somebody doesn't understand, he thinks there's a being inside that robot. So we are quite a perfect robot. Our computer works automatically. So the Buddha gives this simile of this banana tree. If any one of you is a kampong boy like me, you know when you chop down a banana tree, usually after you harvest the fruit, we chop down the banana tree, right? So when you chop down the banana tree, you have banana trees here. You find, if you don't understand, this man is looking for hardwood. And he sees this banana tree, he doesn't understand, he's looking for hardwood in the banana tree. So he starts peeling the layers of the banana tree because the banana tree is quite peculiar, it's got layers. So when he peels a banana tree right to the center, he doesn't find any wood at all. There's no wood, don't talk about hardwood. So in the same way the Buddha says, when we examine either our body or our mind, when we make a decision, we think I make a decision. When we start investigating whether the mind or the body, there is nothing inside us that is permanent, that is unchanging, that you can call that I. So the Buddha says in the same way, just like inside the banana tree there's no hardwood. So in the same way, there's no person inside, no something solid you can call a self that makes a decision. Suppose monks that a magician or a magician's apprentice would display a magical illusion at a crossroads. A man with good sight would inspect it, ponder it, and carefully investigate it, and it would appear to him to be void, hollow, insubstantial. For what substance could there be in a magical illusion? So too monks, whatever kind of consciousness there is, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, a monk inspects it, ponders it, and carefully investigates it, and it would appear to him to be void, hollow, insubstantial. For what substance could there be in consciousness? I'll stop here for a moment. So here, consciousness conjures up dream. Every time we see ourselves, one lifetime after another lifetime, like a tai hei, a show, just like our dreams. Every time we dream, we see ourselves in that dream. Only when we wake up, then we realize that it was only a dream. So in the same way, consciousness conjures up these dreams of us, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. So the Buddha gives the simile of a magician. He creates an illusion. And if you don't understand, if you don't know he's a magician, you think it's real. The only thing it takes some time to realize that it's just an illusion. So the Buddha says life is also an illusion, just like a dream, one lifetime after another. It's only that when we are inside the dream, we don't realize. So now we are in the dream of life, we don't realize that it's actually just a play of consciousness, what the Hindus call Maya, illusion. Seeing thus monks, the learned noble disciple experiences revulsion towards body, revulsion towards feeling, revulsion towards perception, revulsion towards volition, revulsion towards consciousness. Experiencing revulsion, he becomes dispassionate. Through dispassion, his mind is liberated. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge, it's liberated. He understands, destroyed is birth. The holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more for the state of being. This is what the Blessed One said. Having said this, the Fortunate One, the teacher, further said, form is like a lump of foam, feeling like a water bubble. Perception is like a mirage. Volition is like a banana tree. And consciousness like an illusion. So explain the kinsman of the sun. Kinsman of the sun is a Angirasa. However one may ponder it and carefully investigate it, it appears but hollow and void. When one views it carefully, with reference to this body, the one of broad wisdom has taught that with the abandoning of three things, one sees this body discarded. When vitality, heat and consciousness departs from this physical body, then it lies there cast away, food for others, without volition. Such is this continuum, this illusion, beguiler of fools. It is taught to be a murderer. Here no substance can be found. A monk with energy aroused should look upon the aggregates thus, whether by day or at night, comprehending, ever mindful. He should discard all the fetters and make a refuge for himself. Let him fare as with head ablaze, yearning for the imperishable state. That's the end. So here the Buddha says, when the body is discarded, three things leave the body. Vitality, it's vital energy, heat, body heat, and consciousness. So sometimes the doctor says a person has died. He has not died as long as the body is warm. When a person really dies, then the body becomes cold. So here the Buddha says that life is an illusion. Fools are tricked. And these five aggregates are like a murderer. So the problem is with most people, our minds are muddled up. Our minds are not focused. Blur as they say. So we go through life not seeing things clearly. And because our mind has tricked us, so we have these natural tendencies towards greed, hatred and delusion. And we don't see the consequence clearly. But when we learn the Dhamma and then we train our mind to focus, when our mind becomes focused, and then we see it differently. A person with a focused mind, he see things very clearly. Then things become plain, so evident that we see things clearly, then we know what to do. And we have the strength of mind to do it. If your mind is blur, you don't have the strength. Not only that you can't see clearly, you don't have the strength to do what you should do also. Okay, another sutta, 22.96, Asavati. A certain monk came to see the Buddha, and then sitting to one side, that monk said to the Blessed One, Venerable Sir, is there any body that is permanent, stable, eternal, not subject to change, and that will remain the same, just like eternity itself? Is there, Venerable Sir, any feeling, perception, volition or consciousness that is permanent, stable, eternal, not subject to change, and that will remain the same, just like eternity itself? And the Buddha said, Monk, there is no body that is permanent, stable, eternal, not subject to change, and that will remain the same, just like eternity itself. There is no feeling, no perception, no volition, no consciousness that is permanent, stable, eternal, not subject to change, and that will remain the same, just like eternity itself. Let's stop here for a moment. A lot of us, a lot of people, out of ignorance, we like to believe that there is like a Kuan Yin Bodhisattva is permanently there that will help us when we need help, or any master medicine Buddha or Amitabha Buddha or any God or anything that is any being, some super being that will help us when we need help. But the Buddha says that all beings are will have to die. Will have to die one day. You cannot find a being that is eternal. Then the Blessed One took up a little lump of cow dung in his hand and said to that monk, "Monk, there is not even this much individual existence that is permanent, stable, eternal, not subject to change, and that will remain the same just like eternity itself. If there was this much individual existence that was permanent, stable, eternal, not subject to change, this living of the holy life for the complete destruction of suffering could not be discerned. But because there is not even this much individual existence that is permanent, stable, eternal, not subject to change, thus living of the holy life for the complete destruction of suffering is discerned." Stop here for a moment. So the Buddha is saying that there's nothing that is unchanging. Even a little lump of cow dung, so small, you cannot find any type of being or what, even so small, that has eternal life. The Buddha says, if there is, then there would not be this holy life that is taught for us to get out of samsara, for us to get out of the world. Because the world is full of suffering. There is nothing in the world that you can find permanent happiness. If there is something, or something even so small that will give you permanent happiness, then there's no need to get out of the world, because there isn't. That's why the Buddha says this holy life is lived to get out of this samsara. And the Buddha said, "In the past month, I was a head anointed Khattiya king. I had 84,000 cities, the chief of which was the capital Kusavati. I had 84,000 palaces, the chief of which was the palace named Dhamma. I had 84,000 halls with peaked roofs, the chief of which was the hall named the Great Array. I had 84,000 couches made of ivory, of hardwood, of gold and silver, decked with long-haired coverlets, embroidered with flowers, with choice spreads made of antelope hides, with red awnings overhead and red cushions at both ends. I had 84,000 bull elephants with golden ornaments and golden banners, covered with nets of golden thread, the chief of which was the royal bull elephant named Uposatha. I had 84,000 steeds with golden ornaments and golden banners, covered with nets of golden thread, the chief of which was the royal steed named Valahaka. I had 84,000 chariots with golden ornaments and golden banners, covered with nets of golden thread, the chief of which was the chariot named Vijayanta. I had 84,000 jewels, the chief of which was the jewel gem. I had 84,000 women, the chief of which was Queen Subhadra. I had 84,000 vessels of the Khattiya caste, the chief of whom was the commander gem. I had 84,000 cows with tethers of fine jute and milk pails of bronze. I had 84,000 kotis of garments made of fine linen, of fine silk, of fine wool, of fine cotton. I had 84,000 plates on which my meals were served both in the morning and in the evening. Of those 84,000 cities, monk, there was only one city in which I resided at that time, the capital Kusavati. Of those 84,000 palaces, there was only one palace in which I resided at that time, the palace named Dhamma. Of those 84,000 halls with peaked roof, there was only one hall with peaked roof in which I resided at that time, the hall named the Great Array. Of those 84,000 couches, there was only one couch that I used at that time, one made either of ivory, or of hardwood, or of gold, or of silver. Of those 84,000 elephants, there was only one elephant that I rode at that time, the royal bull elephant named Uposatha. Of those 84,000 steeds, there was only one steed that I rode at that time, the royal steed named Valahaka. Of those 84,000 chariots, there was only one chariot that I rode at that time, the chariot named Vijayanta. Of those 84,000 women, there was only one woman who waited on me at that time, either a Khattiya maiden or a Velamika maiden. This Velamika is a maiden born of a Khattiya royal a warrior clan, and a Brahmin. Of those 84,000 kotis of garments, there was only one pair of garments that I wore at that time. One made either of fine linen, or of fine silk, or of fine wool, or of fine cotton. Of those 84,000 plates, there was only one plate from which I ate at most, a measure of rice with a suitable curry. Thus, monk, all these conditioners have passed, ceased, changed. So impermanent are conditioners, monks. Conditioners here is sankhara. So unstable, so unreliable. It is enough, monks, to feel revulsion towards all conditioners, enough to become dispassionate towards them, enough to be liberated from them. The end of the sutta. These conditioners here refers to things in the world. All the things in the world are conditioners as well as conditioned things. So here the Buddha, sometimes he likes to think back about this life when he was a wheel-turning king. He was a universal monarch. He was king of the whole earth. And that life was a very beautiful life. He enjoyed it so much. So he sometimes was a bit sentimental about it. Think about it. So much so that when the Buddha was about to pass away, he went to a particular place, and Ananda didn't understand why he went to such a ulu, way out place. And the Buddha says that's because this used to be his capital when he was a universal monarch, king of the whole earth. This was his capital called Kusavati. He resided there, so he wanted to go back there and pass away. So you see, the Buddha says life is so impermanent. Such a beautiful life also has gone by like a dream. So in the same way, if we one day we have this psychic ability to know our past lives, then we look at our past lives. It's just like one dream after another, one dream after another. But when you are in a particular life, you think it's so important. Everything in that life is so important. When it goes by, then you realize that there was nothing that was important. All has to become cold. Everything has to become cold. So I think I'll stop here for a moment. Anything to discuss? Empty of what? Self-comb? Oh, kong. Oh, this word kong comes from the Sanskrit word sunyata. This word sunyata, when the Buddha says empty, it means just like the concept of anatta. It does that there is no thing that is unchanging, because everything is in a state of flux and keep changing and keep changing. So it is empty of a self, empty of something that is permanent, that is unchanging, that is a core. So since there is no such thing, that's why I say that it is empty. Yeah. Oh, it's an Indian way of speaking, just like they shake their head. It's a way of speaking. So sometimes they say 500, sometimes they say 84,000. Yeah, because it's an Indian tradition to use that this way of describing, meaning a lot, meaning many thousand, not necessarily 84,000, many thousands. I think the Buddha is saying that because there is nothing that is unchanging, that's eternal, so everything must go by. So when he talk about everything has to being impermanent, everything has to go by, then maybe he was a bit sentimental, then he thought about his life where he was so happy. and he was so famous and all that. Still that also has to go by. Because like imagine if you look into your past life and then you realize at one time you were a great king. Of course you stand up in your mind, everything must go by. Even at that time when I was such a great king, all that also had to go by. And then, the few similes that we've gone through just now actually are very striking, very, very good. But if you didn't have a teacher to explain to you, if you read the book yourself, it will be difficult to catch the meaning so clearly, and like the contact. When I started learning the suttas, reading the suttas, many things also I didn't understand. But then I read through them, I think maybe got 10 times I've gone through the suttas. So that's why I become more familiar now. And each time you read, you sort of make some notes. Those important points you underline. It's good to underline pencil rather than pen, because sometimes certain things you underline you thought was important. Later you realize it's not so important. Then you can delete with the rubber. So when you listen like this, you have the advantage of a lot of years of experience. So you save on your time. I think for the Anagamin and Arahant, because they have attained 4 jhanas, their mind is very clear. Greed normally is identified with sensual pleasure, but not only sensual pleasure, because like greed to be reborn in the formless world, greed to be born in the form realm, that is in the higher fetters. That is still greed. Yes. So that's why they are called the 5 lower factors. It's not a higher greed, it's a lower greed. Greed for the sensual pleasures, worldly pleasures. For example, if a person has a temper, if our mind is not developed, we have a big temper. It flares up easily. So when a person becomes a Sakadagamin, the reduction is so much that it's very noticeable. He himself notices it, and other people also notice it. He does not flare up anymore, but he still has some anger inside, and it's not like the Anagamin. Anagamin has totally suppressed it, or eliminated it. Oh yes. Sotapanna, yes. So, it's not mentioned. But you see, once a person has become an Arya, he becomes a changed person. He becomes a humble person, because he must become humble, because he does not see himself in the 5 aggregates. You see, whereas although generally a person who has attained jhana, the Buddha says he has cut the passions. In other words, anger and lust he does not possess. But because the root is still there, so when the conditions are right, actually this anger can come up. Just like Devadatta. When the Buddha scolded him in front of all the assembly of monks, saying, liken him to spittle. Who do you think you are? You want to take my place as the leader of the Sangha? I say, you are like spittle. People spit out. Nobody wants. He got so angry, then he decided to want to kill the Buddha. So he tried various ways to kill the Buddha. You see? So you see the anger can arise. Also in the sutta is mentioned that there are certain place the Buddha mentioned that it was all burnt out. And the Buddha said, That was burnt out because long time ago there was an ascetic who cultivated until he had psychic power. And then the villagers did something that made him totally angry, and he used his psychic power to burn the whole village and kill all of them. So you see, even though you attain jhana and psychic power and all that, if you are not an Arya, it's still very dangerous. That's why there are some teachers, they say if their disciple has attained psychic power, they ask him to stop it, get rid of it. Because the wisdom level has not come up yet. And then the psychic power come up, the ego will come up. And when the ego comes up, it's very dangerous. A lot of people, just like they practice mantras, and then they find there's some power, and the ego will arise. Or similarly with meditation also. If the wisdom factor is not balanced, then they have some psychic power, and the ego, instead of decreasing, will increase. It's not exactly that he broke his precept, it's that because of the ego. So when the Prince Ajatasattu offered him 500 dishes every morning and night, he accepted. So that was one contributory factor. Another one was when he asked to become the leader of the Sangha, and the Buddha told him off. So he got so annoyed. I think when he just decided to kill the Buddha, I think he must have lost all his psychic power, because the mind starts working at that time. His mind becomes agitated as he has to plan how to kill the Buddha and all that. For a person to remain with his psychic power, and his mind has to be very tranquil. Comes from here, the Buddha's words. That's why I constantly have to study the Buddha's words. A lot of people make the mistake, they only want to meditate, they don't want to study the Buddha's words. So they can't handle the ego. This is the wisdom factor here. This is actually studying the Buddha's words, is the vipassana. Contemplation of the Buddha's words. That will bring you wisdom. Of course, the higher the wisdom, if you have more samadhi, the more samadhi you have, combined with vipassana, contemplation of the Buddha's words, then will give you more wisdom. Okay, we stop here for tonight.